Dr. Betty is a distinguished leader whose career spans over 2.5 decades, transforming businesses, cultures, and individual lives. As the CEO of Effectus Enterprises and a United Nations Ambassador for Peace and Human Rights, Dr. Betty has collaborated with global leaders and driven significant change across diverse industries. Here we explore her remarkable journey, exploring the pivotal moments, unique challenges, and profound insights that have shaped her path to becoming a true catalyst for transformation.
So let's talk about the fact that you've dipped your toes in just about everything in your life, from real estate to biomedical engineering. So what are some of the wildest challenges you've faced in these different fields, and how did your unique background help you navigate that?
Well, you mentioned biomedical engineering. So my first company, I was pregnant with my son. I was 20 years old, and we started this company building surgical lighting components. So in a surgery, there needs to be a light, and the light needs to be cool enough to be able to have the body open and not bring this light into the body. So there's some engineering that happens with it. And I started this with my partner at the time in our garage. And so I had to bring in workers to come in and to work the metal and to build this part. And Kaiser Permanente is one of the biggest medical companies in the United States. They carried our light, our gynecological light. And so at that time, that was difficult. Like, how am I going to manage these people? How am I going to do this? So I went out and took a free enterprise course. And in the free enterprise course, I learned how to pay people for good parts. And so instead of paying them by the hour, I paid them by the part, by the good part. So we would manufacture the parts in my garage. We had the machinery. And so I would inspect the parts, and I would only pay for the good parts. And so by doing that, I learned about free enterprise. I learned about managing people. I learned about bringing them in and paying for the finished part instead of paying for the hour. And I learned then later on what I learned here in this little company, I transposed into managing leaders and letting them know, okay, I'm going to pay you for the results. You can do them at the beach if you want to. You can work anywhere. It doesn't really matter to me, but I'm only going to acknowledge your results. And so understanding that the process and the excuses and all of these things come in, I learned about human condition and how to manage people from where they are. And so I think that was a big challenge for me because it was my first company. But I also went back to my childhood when my father, as an entrepreneur, he had a manufacturing company and a trucking company, a fleet of semi-trucks. And when I was little, he would say, "Come on, Betty, I want you to go with me." I thought he was lonely. Little did I know, he would take me to the suppliers. I learned how to manage the suppliers. He would take me to the customers. I learned how to manage the customers. He would take me to the employees, to the drivers of the semi-trucks, and we would take clothing, food, to the wives, to the children. I learned how to be kind to my employees. I learned how to treat them as a peer and not as an employee. I learned how to create value for them in a personal way, how to treat them like family. And so all of these things that I learned, I brought throughout my career, and bringing my heart into everything has been pivotal to making the difference. After I left Chase, or right before I left Chase, people would say, Betty brought the heart into JP Morgan Chase. Betty brought humanity into JP Morgan Chase. She gave me permission to be myself. She gave me permission to say the word God in my vocabulary. She gave me permission to treat my employees with kindness. She gave me permission. One executive said, I've never met anybody that just allows me to be myself. People say to quiet me down, and you don't do that to me. You allow me. And I said, I don't allow you. I just open the space where you allow yourself. You do this yourself. So empowering others and all of that, it comes from my childhood, where my mother used to take care of the people that swept the streets. She would bring them to the house and she would sit them at the main table. And it wasn't the maids when I was little who made the dinner. It was my mother who cooked for them, and my mother who served them, while she would send me up to my bedroom and my closet to take my very best brand new clothes that were bought and gave it to the sweepers on the street. Her very best that my father just bought, because our whole closet was changed every January. And after the closet was changed, that's when my mother would do it. She didn't give them hand-me-downs. She gave them our very best. And so learning to give my very best, I'm going to get emotional here because there's someone that I care about. It's one of my clients who is giving his speech for his father who passed away right now in this moment. And I told him yesterday, I said, you're going to keep your parents alive through your actions, through your speeches. Your parents are always going to be with you. And I just hit a nerve because I'm keeping my parents alive. And we do. We think that they're gone, but they're not gone. Just their body's gone. Their spirit stays with us. And it's been decades since my parents passed away. And I still get emotional when I think about everything that I learned from them and how what I do today. My mom never believed in titles. She knew that, she said, you're the daughter of the mighty king, that makes you a princess. And so she called me princess. And the titles didn't matter to her. The money didn't matter to her. None of that mattered. Time and space didn't matter to her. And guess what? That's how I am today. Time and space doesn't matter. It's this moment in time that really matters, and how much impact can I make.
It's so beautiful. And you're right, the value of the moment, the value of being present and right here in this, what we're sharing at this very moment that cannot be replicated. It can only be enjoyed and embraced. And the value simply of that. I think it's very strange that we're human beings and yet we have such a hard time just being. We're like human doings, human goings, human whatever, but just to be.
You know what I think? You know what I think about that, Allie? I think of a child, right? And a child will say, why is the sky blue? Why are you sitting in that chair? Why can't you move your arm? Why can't you speak? Mommy, why is it that that person is dying and that other person is being born? And why are those two people with the same sex holding hands? Why? The question is such an innocent question. They don't worry about, oh, they're going to hurt my feelings yet until somebody does, right? And the moment somebody does, then all of a sudden that wall goes up. And that wall keeps them from being able to open up in that area. So then they open up in this area or with this other person. But now they've got something here. And it's those wounds that continue to create those walls for us until the moment in time when we realize, wait a minute, that's not how I used to be. That's not, even the Bible says you must be as a child, right? And and I'm not only singling the Bible, there are so many different books from different religions that bring so much wisdom. And so when you dig deep into history, when you dig deep into childhood, when the moment in time when we're able to come to the table completely open, and I call it naked, figuratively naked. You and I talked about how you were going to be asking the questions, and I said, go ahead and ask, because I want to be in the moment, and I'm going to just answer. And I know magic's going to happen. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, magic's going to happen. We mentioned that from the time we started talking this morning, and I've been so looking forward to this. And why? Because it's okay to be imperfectly perfect. And
indeed it is.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful when we find that people embrace their imperfections, that somebody embraces who they really are. There's someone, a mentor and dear friend of mine, Joe Polish, who has the Genius Network, and I joined his network this year as a result of reading his book. What's in It for Them is the name of the book, and that's really it. It's about giving unconditionally and just showing up as your imperfect self and embracing who you are and bringing your wounds to the table. I almost like to say that our perfect imperfections are the things that make us perfect, that make us unique, that make us who we are, that gives us the opportunity and the license to make a difference.
I love that, the license to make a difference. No, 100%. Can you tell us about an inspiring or tough collaboration that really changed how you view leadership and human rights?
For me personally, and having left my country, Colombia, this country, as a 12-year-old, the daughter of a beautiful man who happened to be an alcoholic, who used to beat up my mom, who almost killed her right before my eyes. And the reason why my mother sat us down, I was 12, and in an airplane ride, we became poor. In an airplane ride, I became nobody. I became invisible because I didn't speak the language. I didn't know the culture. I've always had this innocent curiosity, and I've always loved to learn. I've had just this insatiable desire and thirst to learn and to share what I learned. And that's what probably one of those things, plus my faith, has gotten me at the table, to have a seat at the table at the highest levels, and in such an elegant, simple way, where I just pick up the seat and grab the chair and just sit down. And I sit and I just kind of make myself comfortable, and I listen, and I'm curious, and I ask the questions. And I said, now that didn't make sense. So why would you price that way? Why wouldn't we stair step the pricing? Because it doesn't make sense that this country would get 20% and that you would get 80%. It doesn't make sense when the treasures are there. Can we stair step it so that there's this? And I'm just coming whole, and I'm not second guessing my own questions. I'm maybe in a split of a second, my mind would say, but you're not the expert in this. And my mind also says, but you're seated at the table for a reason. Ask the question anyway. And then I go and I say, Your Highness, is this okay? This is the question I have. And Your Highness says, absolutely, that's the same question I have. And then all of a sudden, in a split of a second, you get the confirmation that the question that you're having is the right question. And then the other person says, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. We can stair step it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, I just added a little bit of value. Maybe it's a little bit of value, but it's huge for the people that are there because they're now not being exploited. And I learned a lot from our trip to Dubai, where you and I were there. I did a lot of research around the backside of Dubai. I got to raise my hand, and you were there when I raised my hand. And there was somebody, let's just say somebody with a turban that was speaking. And I said, okay, so would you be able to do this? and I put him on the spot in a very simple, elegant way without putting him on the spot with any type of judgment. It was just a question. And he said, yes, of course. And I said, when? You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
He said, when? And for me, it's not, I'm going to put this person on the spot. It's, let's get it done, and let's get it done now. Because we only have one lifetime, and there's a sense of urgency. There's this fire in my belly to get things done. As long as I'm alive, as long as this body is here with a spirit inside it, I will make a difference. And so those are some of the situations that I'm being put in. Another situation that I can share openly is 2 weeks ago, I was outside of London, and I showed up one day early and to this meeting, and they said, oh my gosh, Dr. Betty's here, and you're just in time. The delegation is here. And I'm thinking, the delegation? Okay, the delegation, sure, let's go in. And so they're like, well, I just took an airplane ride from America, from Los Angeles to London, and then 3 train rides. And so people thought I was tired. And so they said, well, if you want to go up and rest, we can find your room. I said, no, I want to go and be with the people. Like, I'm not here to rest. I'm here to get things done. And so I showed up, and I'm shaking hands with you. Hi, my name is Dr. Betty. And they're like, oh, I'm Senator this. I'm parliamentary leader this. I'm from this country. I'm from this country. And I'm like, very naturally, again, making myself, and I do this because that's how we make ourselves comfortable in a chair. And I do this with each conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, parliamentary leader, senator, Congress, and from this country. I mean, we had Finland, we had Canada, we had France, we had, of course, United Kingdom, several countries from the United Kingdom, several countries from Africa. And all of these people, we were complete strangers, but I showed up, and I showed up with myself. And when they asked me to share my story, I shared about my alcoholic father. I shared about my coming to America. I didn't share about the titles I've had because those don't matter. I just shared about those moments when I was imperfect, those moments that made me human. And then all of a sudden, somebody says, hey, I just texted the first lady in my country, and guess what? You're going to be the keynote speaker for next year for the first lady. And that happened in less than a 30-minute conversation. Just like that.
So wild.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you shared about what you shared about yourself. And don't you find that it is when we can share our vulnerabilities, we can share our brokenness, we can share, that's where authentic connection comes in, because that's where we can really, those moments where healing was required are moments that when we share them, people feel they can relate, they can resonate with that, right?
Yeah, they can. And I can tell you time and time again, where I've been in a circle of people from all over the world. I was in Berlin today's June. Yeah, this time last year I was in Berlin for the first time with this group of people, and they divided men and women, and it was a big circle. There were like 50 women in this particular circle, and they said, in here you can share about anything, and who would like to share? And my heart started thumping, because my heart thumps. And I'm like, oh, I don't know these people, and they're from these different countries, and they're from these titles and all of this. And then all of a sudden I just put my hand up like this. Because I can't go back from this. I can go back from this and do this, but I can't go back from this. And so I say, okay, it's now or never, raise my hand. And so I raised my hand, and I shared about my imperfections. And I have to tell you, the reason I hesitated to share was because the women were talking about genocide and how they escaped genocide, where they were the only living person in their family. And I'm thinking, how can I add value to that? How can I, oh my gosh, there's no way. And then I went like this, and I said, okay, let me tell you. And then I remembered about the bombing that happened in Colombia and how I escaped death. I was walking through in a hotel when the bomb hit right across the street, in a jagged edge of glass barely missed, like if this was my head, it barely missed my head, and it would have cut me in half. And the fact that there were bombings happening, that I was walking in my own country, and then that the drug lords and all of these things came to mind. And I thought, wait a minute, I also have that in my history, and I can share that part of my life. And at the end of this, after I told my story, one of the parliamentary leaders that was sitting next to me, she said, "Can I take my picture with you? And can we have a conversation?" The woman whose whole family was obliterated, and she was the only living person, she came to me, hugged me with tears in her eyes, and said, "Dr. Betty, we have so much in common. Thank you so much for sharing your life." Because this is what happens. IGM, I got mine. And women don't normally work well together, because when women and other women get together, then we start comparing. You're prettier, you're skinnier, you're more intelligent, you've got a better position, you're making more money, you're this. And we start comparing, and then we start diminishing ourselves. And then one person, the queen bee, has to be the one, right? Why couldn't we be like these women where, again, time, space, titles, nothing mattered? It was just us giving to one another and being together in a space of brokenness, and being together in a space of bringing health to one another, elevating one another, supporting one another, and doing what you and I are doing here for each other right now. Mm-hmm. Why couldn't we do that? And so I think in the times that I have been with the President of the United States, several of them, with primary parliamentary leaders, heads of state, it doesn't matter what their title is, CEOs of multi-trillion-dollar companies all over the world, people who have invented the latest technology that works in NASA. It doesn't matter, or a child, or a wife in the slums of India who has been brought to nothing because her husband passed away, and now she wants to throw herself in the fire. It doesn't, like I said, time, space, gender, none of that matters. What matters is this moment that we have right now, and the person that is in front of us. How much value can we bring to that person and to the people around them? That's all we're going to have at the end of the day. When we're in our deathbed, what are people going to say about us? And most importantly, what are we going to say about ourselves?
Yeah. Right. And so that's where I think we can get so caught up. We get this tunnel vision where and that's the way our society has sort of been shaped over time, right? That we're always focused on the win. What's the win? What's the win? And as opposed to chalking up, these are all of my wins, and I'm so proud of the. What if we reverse engineer that? And it's like, how many wins have I given? How many wins was I able to get for someone else? Those are the kind of wins I think on our deathbed we can feel so much better about. And that means so much more and have so much more weight.
There were studies that were done in the United States of people that gave their kidney. And listen to this. This is really interesting. So they studied the people that gave their kidney to science, right? So that somebody else could have their own kidney. Now, giving away a kidney is a big deal. It takes a lot of thought because you only have two. And then when you give one away, you only have one. And if something happens to that one, you could actually die unless somebody else gives it, right? So it's the ultimate gift, right? Giving away a kidney. They observed these individuals who volunteered to give away their kidney. And they noticed that the individuals who were giving away their kidney would fly into the hospital area one day early, at least one day early. They were on time. They did all their homework. They read everything. They filled out the paperwork way before time, and they gave away in such a joyous way. And then they measured their happiness. You're going to like this one. And they measured their happiness levels. And they found that their happiness levels were so much above the levels of the general population, even though they were giving away their kidney. One would think their worriness level would have been bigger, or their uncertainty, or their thinking that they could die on the table because they could. None of that. Their joy levels were much higher. This was because they were giving unconditionally. The ultimate gift.
Let's switch gears a moment. I know the titles don't matter, but the work that's done, what is done, and how it's done, right? So I want to just for a moment talk about, big deal, your time at JP Morgan Chase, because it was nothing short of impressive, with a huge deposit increase, a whole cultural overhaul. What were some of the key moves that you made to spark such a big change? I mean, I'm thinking about people who are in these corporate situations, and this is their day-to-day life, helping them, bringing them into this conversation intimately and personally now. How did you do it? And then how did you keep those positive vibes going? Tell us about that magic.
Okay, I'll tell you about my very first phone call. I had 10,000 employees, and my boss, Stevie, held a call to introduce me to the team. There was already a buzz because people had looked me up and all of this, and they're like, how do we call you? Do we call you Dr. Betty? And do all of this? And it was funny. So the first 60 seconds of my introduction to them was as follows. I said, I was born in Bogota, Colombia. At the age of 12, my mother sat us down and said, would you like to go to the United States? Because I can't stay here. Your father's going to kill me if I stay here. My father was an alcoholic. He was a very successful entrepreneur. And at the age of 12, I became poor in an airplane ride, and I cleaned houses and babysat. And I raised my 6-year-old brother. I was 12. I became an adult. And I vowed that I would retire my mother someday because she sacrificed being a woman of society and having everything she needed for coming to America. I was in America at the time. And she worked in a factory, getting paid 25 cents for every pair of jeans she sewed in a sweatshop. She would get up at 3 a.m. to go to work. And then I would be responsible. I was Cinderella. I was responsible for cleaning the house, for cooking. I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know how to make my bed. I had to learn how to make coffee. Then I had to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to do all of this. And then to clean the houses of our neighbors when I never even made my bed in Colombia, because we have maids that did everything. That was my first 60 seconds when I told them that I eventually retired my mother with my first bonus, and that I educated myself. And I called my mom at the factory and said, today's your last day. You're never going to work again in your life, and pack your bags because I'm going to spend my bonus on you. And the bonus was a $10,000 bonus back then. And I spent $10,000 on my mother in that summer. And I took her first class to Mexico. We did everything imaginable. And I swore and I vowed to myself that I was always going to make her sacrifice worthwhile. And to this day, I think of her sacrifice to give us a better life. And my father eventually left alcohol and apologized to all of us and became just the most incredible human. But that was my first 60 seconds. So to answer your question, it was really important to me to not just be one more leader, one more JP Morgan Chase leader, the cookie cutter. If you think of JP Morgan Chase, you think of the cookie cutter. I don't know if you've seen the movie or the Suits. It's this law office where everybody is just dressed proper and everything is just perfect and everything. It was really important to me to show up as myself. And I remember after that moment when I just talked about my life, my mother, my father, my alcoholic father, my imperfections coming to America, being a maid in America. And this is, I was running the Crown Jewel. It was 5 divisions. There were only 5 of me. And I was running California, which was, they called it the Crown Jewel for JP Morgan Chase. So to show up in that way was very disruptive and very unlike JP Morgan, because at JP Morgan Chase at the time, and probably still, you run with your title, you run with your accolades, with your titles and with what you've accomplished. And I've done this and I've done that. And I remember when other people were brought in and what they would talk about, it was always their title. And it was never my title when I introduced myself to fellow executives and fellow people. I went to Jamie Dimon's Top 200 conference, where he took the top 200 people from every division around the world. And I met people, and I would just say, hey, my name is Betty, my name is Betty, my name is Betty. And then I remember sitting in a circle and saying, my name is Betty. Well, where are you from? Well, I run JP Morgan, California for the retail bank. So you're the Betty. You're the one. Oh my gosh. Congratulations. What you've done there. And those conversations began to happen, and then it just kind of spread like wildlife. But it wasn't about, my name is Dr. Betty, and this is what I've done for California. It was just, I'm Betty. And showing up as just my first name has been, I think, the catalyst to give permission to others to do the same. And I find the opportunity to show up as a human and to make sure that everybody sees that it's okay to be human, that it's okay to be imperfect. Where they would ask me a question and I would say, you know what? I don't know. Can you teach me? And they would look at me like, the executive is saying that? Yeah, can you teach me? And I would go behind the teller line and I would say, so what are you working on? Oh, well, I'm working on this. Oh, I don't know how to use that system. Can you teach me? You want to learn the system? Yeah, I want to learn what you're doing every day. How am I supposed to appreciate what you're doing if I don't learn it? Yeah, can you teach me? And, little things like that seem tiny, but this is how you create a social epidemic on goodness. And this is how you do it in a corporate America. This is how you do it in a family. This is how you do it in a city. This is how you do it in a governmental agency. This is how you do it because let's go back to physics. There's a law of order in everything. And if all we do is just show up as ourselves, the law of order is going to carry the message very naturally. We don't have to do it and stand in the corner and say, look what I did. People naturally will say, oh my gosh, this person is real. And they will appreciate that because that's not what they're getting from other people.
I know titles are not the thing, but if there were a title, you probably should have had like Chief Appreciation Officer. And so CAO, let's start that. Let's get that going in corporate America.
I like that. I love that. Chief Appreciation Officer.
Just by acknowledging, just by saying, I see you, I value you.
Yes.
And how starved so many people are for that they're trying to find it in the wrong places.
They do. And it takes a millisecond to come down from our title and to just become human right with them. And I always said, we create an environment where people are valued, respected, appreciated, and heard. It's just simple.
It's simple and it's elegant. Thank you so much this has been such an amazing conversation. If we might conclude this way, if there's one piece of advice all the advice you've been given and blessed with, and likewise then, all that you've given. One piece of advice.
Trust yourself and show up and give it all away.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hold back. Because what happens when we hold back is we're not holding back from others. We're holding back from the universe, from everybody. Make it worthwhile that you learned the lessons that you learned. The way to make it worthwhile is to give it away and to lift others up with it. Otherwise, then you went through what you went through for naught.
Mm-hmm.
Make it worthwhile that you lived. What is your epitaph going to be? And really think about, my epitaph is going to be really simple. She made a difference. That's it. Very simple. Very simple. So don't worry about what it looks like. Don't worry about the blank, that I'm not blank enough. Just trust that you've been put there for a reason, and show up 100% and give it all away, because you're not going to take it with you.
Thank you so much for everything you have shared in this conversation, in this space. Thank you for helping all of us become a bit more aware now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Allie. And thank you for being the person you are, because you create the space where people like me can just show up and can share abundantly. And we together make such a huge impact. But it can only happen when people like you create the space, and when you're vulnerable enough, and when you show up as yourself, and when you don't worry about what that looks like, and you just show up. All I'm doing is I'm expressing who you are in that piece of advice, because that's what you do. I've seen you. I've observed you. I've seen you in Dubai. I've seen you during blogs. I've seen you now for a few months, and that's what I see in you. So thank you for being who you are.
Thank you so much. It means everything. Well, that was really magical.